Japan's long-governing Liberal Democratic Party, or the LDP, suffered a shock defeat in parliamentary elections that happened on Sunday. It also saw new right-wing populist groups make significant political ground. This could see a tectonic shift in Japan, a country that has been one of the world's most stable democracies. Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba has vowed to stay on in his post after his Liberal Democrats and their coalition partner lost 19 of the 66 seats that were up for re-election.
いつまでという期限を今考えておるわけではございません。先ほど申し上げましたように、アメリカの関税措置、あるいは物価高への対応、明日起こるかもしれない自然災害への対応、そして戦後最も複雑で厳しい安全保障環境、このような喫緊の課題について解決の道筋をつけると、全力で対応すると、そのことを申し上げておるところでございます。
Now this means that the ruling party no longer controls the upper house of the Diet or the Japanese parliament. Now the ruling party is in a minority in both houses of parliament, and Prime Minister Ishiba is running a minority government in coalition with other parties. So much so, after Sunday's shock defeat, he's facing calls to step down after the setback wounded the Liberal Democrats, who have led Japan for all but 5 of the last 70 years. Ishiba and his party failed to convince enough voters that they were the party that could help resolve a host of challenges. The biggest concern was rising prices of staples like rice. There's also the tough tariff negotiations that are going on with the United States, and the growing burden that young people in Japan have to support an aging population and the kind of stress that this has placed on the working age population. The election results exposed a growing generational divide that is altering Japan's politics. The biggest gains were made not by the traditional liberal opposition, but by a gaggle of new parties that drew younger voters with stridently nationalist messages. Among them was Sanseito, a populist party led by a politician inspired by President Trump of America. Many are calling the leader of Sanseito Japan's Trump. For the first time, we are seeing far-right populism, similar to what we've seen in America and in Europe, also rise in Japan. Before all the votes had been entirely counted, powerful members of the governing party, the LDP, were already calling on the Prime Minister Ishiba to step down and take responsibility for what was a poor showing by his party. In fact, Taro Aso, who is a former Deputy Prime Minister, has said on record that he could not accept Ishiba staying on as Prime Minister. Mr. Ishiba has conceded defeat in a television interview late Sunday that the Liberal Democrats had not done well, had not done as per expectations, but he said he had no intention whatsoever of resigning. He said he still has important work to do, and that includes reaching a trade deal with the Trump administration, which Japan has failed to do so despite repeated rounds of talks. In fact, Trump slapped 25% tariffs on Japan bang in the middle of the campaign, something that hurt Ishiba and his party.
我が自由民主党、そして与党公明党、多くの優位な同志の方々、席が得られなかったということは痛恨の極みであります。自由民主党総裁として心より深くお詫びを申し上げる次第でございます。
But analysts say that Prime Minister Ishiba could struggle to find support within his party, particularly so because this is the second defeat in the last 1 year. Last year, the Liberal Democrats lost their majority in the lower house, which is the house which directly elects members of the parliament. And now this year, they've also lost their majority in the upper house. If Prime Minister Ishiba is forced to step down, it could create a political paralysis at a time when Japan faces an increasingly assertive China. There's also the ongoing tough tariff negotiations with Trump and with America. The biggest winners from Sunday night's vote were two new nationalist parties, the Democratic Party for the People and Sanseito. The Democrats gained 13 seats, more than doubling their total presence in the upper house. They're now up to 22. Sanseito, which is a newer and more extreme party, also won 13 seats, bringing their total to 15. Both parties managed to win over younger voters in Japan with populist appeals. They said that they will strengthen the military. They will also cut a consumption tax that has been paid for pensions and other costs to support Japan's growing population of senior citizens. Sanseito, which had barely been a presence in the national politics of Japan, rose almost overnight with promises to put Japan and Japanese first. The party called for stopping an influx of immigrants who fill jobs that have been left vacant amid Japan's declining birth rate. But Sanseito says that these foreigners threaten Japan's social stability. Japan has about 3 million or so foreign-born residents, which is still much less compared to immigrants in Europe or in America. Sanseito was born on YouTube during the COVID-19 pandemic. It spread conspiracy theories about vaccinations, about a cabal of global elites. The party broke into mainstream politics with its Japan First campaign. Sanseito became the talk of town, and particularly both in America and in Europe, because of the whole populist and anti-foreigner sentiment that the party stood for. The party's leader, Sohei Kamiya, a former supermarket manager and an English teacher, told Reuters before the election that he had drawn inspiration from the US President Donald Trump and his bold political style. He's also drawn comparisons with Germany's AfD and Reform UK, although right-wing populist politics is yet to take firm roots in Japan, much like they have in Europe and in the United States. In fact, he also controversially suggested that the Japanese emperor must go back to the pre-World War II tradition of keeping concubines, and that women should stay at home and raise children and not work. Voters interviewed at polling stations in Tokyo and other cities said that while some of these populist policies were too extreme for them, they wanted to protest against the ruling party, the Liberal Democrats. They say the LDP has lost touch. It is out of touch with the mainstream of Japan. Most of the people's anger was about rising prices of staples, particularly rice. Eventually, this may be more about teaching the ruling party a lesson more than the rise of right-wing populism in Japan. The next few weeks in Japanese politics will be worth paying close attention to.